Working since 16. Never asked for a dime and still paid off my own education. I bought my first home alone and got sued by my parents for stealing my sister's future. My name is Amber, and I'm 29 years old. Since I was 16, I've worked every job I could find to support myself. I paid my own way through college, cleared my student loans, and finally saved enough for a down payment on a small house. It should have been the proudest moment of my life when I got those keys. Instead, I found myself staring at court papers. My own parents were suing me for 70% of my home's value, claiming I had stolen my sister Emma's future. If you're watching this, please drop a comment letting me know where you're from. Hit that like button and subscribe as I share how my greatest achievement became my deepest heartbreak. I grew up in a family of 4 in a modest suburb of Minneapolis. My father, John, worked as an insurance adjuster, and my mother, Karen, was a part-time receptionist at a dental office. Then there was me and my sister Emma, who was 8 years younger. From the outside, we probably looked like a typical middle-class American family. But behind closed doors, money was always a point of tension. Our house was filled with constant arguments about finances. Bills piled up on the kitchen counter, and hushed conversations about money would stop whenever I entered the room. Despite having steady jobs, my parents always seemed to be living paycheck to paycheck. Looking back, I realized much of it was poor financial management rather than an actual lack of income. What hurt most as a child was the obvious difference in how my parents treated Emma and me. From an early age, they decided Emma was the special one, the child with real potential. They would say things like, "Emma has natural talent," or "Emma could really be somebody someday." When it came to me, the message was clear, though never directly stated. I was ordinary, average, nothing exceptional to invest in. By the time I was 14, I had internalized this message. I was the practical one, the responsible one. I started helping our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, with household chores after school. She would pay me $10 an hour to vacuum, dust, and organize her medication. This became my first taste of financial independence. I used that money to buy school supplies, clothes, and occasionally treats, like ice cream with friends. My parents never asked where these items came from. They simply seemed relieved not to have to provide them. When I turned 16, I applied for my first real job at Sweet Dreams Bakery, 6 blocks from our house. I'd walk there after school, work until closing at 7:30, then head home to start my homework. The owner, Diane, was a kind woman who quickly became a mentor to me. She taught me not just about baking, but about customer service, inventory management, and the importance of saving money. The day I received my first paycheck was both exciting and disappointing. I had planned to open a savings account, dreaming of college and independence. Instead, my father sat me down at the kitchen table. "Now that you're earning money, you need to contribute to the household," he said, sliding a calculator toward me. 30% of your earnings should come to us for rent, food, and utilities." I stared at him in disbelief. "But Dad, I'm only 16. I thought I should be saving for college." "College?" My mother laughed from the doorway. "Amber, be realistic. With your grades, you'd be better off learning a trade. Besides, Emma will need a college fund. She has a real future ahead of her." That 30% rule remained in place throughout my high school years. I never missed a payment, even as I watched my sister receive gift after gift. Emma got piano lessons at $200 a month. She took ballet classes 3 times a week. Her room was redecorated with beautiful furniture while I still had the same twin bed from childhood. My routine became grueling but predictable. School from 8 to 3. Work from 3:30 to 7:30. Homework until midnight or later. Weekends meant double shifts at the bakery. Summer breaks were spent working full-time rather than enjoying teenage freedom. The rare occasions when I bought something new for myself were met with judgment. "Another new shirt, Amber?" my mother would say. You should be more responsible with your money." This from the woman who had just spent $300 on a special ballet costume for Emma. During my junior year of high school, I picked up a second job on weekends at the local library. I told my parents it was for extra spending money, but in reality, I was building a secret college fund. The library job paid less than the bakery, but offered something more valuable: quiet hours to study during slow periods. My grades began to improve significantly. Mrs. Peterson, who had become something of a grandmother figure to me, noticed my exhaustion one day when I came to help her. Amber, dear, you're working yourself to the bone, she said, pouring me a cup of hot chocolate. What are you saving for that requires so much sacrifice? When I explained my situation, tears welled in her eyes. Your parents should be supporting your dreams, not the other way around, she said. She began paying me extra, insisting I put it directly into my college fund. By my senior year, I had maintained a 3.8 GPA, despite my work schedule, and had saved nearly $8,000 for college. My guidance counselor helped me apply for scholarships and financial aid, believing in me when my own family did not. When acceptance letters started arriving, my parents seemed more annoyed than proud. College is expensive, my father warned. Don't come crying to us when you can't afford it. I'm not asking for help, I replied. I have my scholarship and savings. I'll figure out the rest. My mother sighed dramatically. I don't understand why you need to go at all. You have a perfectly good job at the bakery. Diane would probably make you assistant manager if you stayed. Because I want more than that, Mom. I want a career, not just a job. And what about your contribution to this household? My father demanded. How are we supposed to make up that shortfall? It was in that moment that I realized they had been counting on my income far longer than I had understood. The 30% I had been paying wasn't about teaching me responsibility. It was about supplementing their budget so they could afford Emma's activities. I wasn't a daughter being guided toward independence. I was an income source. I'm sorry, but I'm going to college, I said firmly, surprised by my own resolve. I've worked for this opportunity, and I'm taking it. The weeks before I left home were filled with cold shoulders and passive-aggressive comments. My parents acted as if I was abandoning the family rather than pursuing an education. Only Emma seemed genuinely happy for me, though at 11 years old, she didn't fully understand the tension. Move-in day at the dormitory was a solo experience. My parents claimed they couldn't take time off work to drive me, so I packed what I could into 2 worn suitcases and took the bus to campus. My roommate Jennifer arrived with her entire family, who helped set up her side of the room with coordinated bedding, decorative pillows, and framed family photos. I unpacked my secondhand sheets and a single photo of me and Emma in silence. That first night, listening to Jennifer talk on the phone with her parents about how much she already missed them, I cried silently into my pillow, not because I missed my family, but because I realized how abnormal my relationship with them truly was. The financial reality of college hit hard and fast. Even with my scholarship, the costs were overwhelming. I found a job as a server at a restaurant near campus within my first week. The hours were brutal, 5 to 11 p.m. on weeknights, meaning I went straight from classes to work, then returned to study into the early morning. Weekends were double shifts, often leaving me too exhausted to socialize with other students. During my sophomore year, I added a second job as a teaching assistant for an introductory business course. The pay was minimal, but it looked good on my resume and gave me valuable experience. Between the 2 jobs, I managed to cover my expenses without taking on excessive student loans, though I still had to borrow about $10,000 per year. My tiny dorm room became both sanctuary and prison. My desk lamp burned until 3 or 4 a.m. as I struggled to keep up with assignments after long shifts. Cup noodles became my primary food source, not because it was a college cliché, but because they cost less than $1 per meal. I tracked every penny in a meticulously organized spreadsheet, calculating exactly how many hours I needed to work each week to survive. Jennifer eventually moved out, claiming my late night studying and early alarms were too disruptive. She was replaced by Jessica, a scholarship student who also worked part-time. Jessica understood my situation in a way Jennifer never could, and we quickly became friends. My parents help when they can, but there are 5 kids in my family, she explained one night as we both studied late. I'm the first to go to college, so I'm kind of the experiment. At least they support you emotionally, I said, not meaning to sound bitter, but failing. Jessica looked at me thoughtfully. Your family situation sounds really toxic, Amber. Have you ever talked to someone about it? Like a therapist? I laughed. With what time or money? Therapy's a luxury I can't afford. Despite the challenges, I excelled academically. My finance and business classes felt relevant and practical after years of managing my own limited budget. Professors began to notice my work ethic, and one recommended me for a summer internship at Meridian Financial Services after my junior year. The internship was a turning point. For the first time, I worked in a professional environment where my contributions were valued. My supervisor, Michael, seemed impressed by my determination and practical knowledge. The summer internship paid more than my restaurant and TA jobs combined, allowing me to save a small cushion for senior year. Throughout those college years, communication with my parents was minimal and almost always centered around money. They rarely called to check on my well-being or academic progress. Instead, phone calls usually began with small talk before inevitably turning to requests. Emma needs new point shoes for ballet. They cost $200. The refrigerator broke. We need $440 for repairs. Emma got accepted to a summer music camp. It's $2,000. I sent money when I could justify it as helping Emma rather than enabling my parents, but each request left me feeling used, not loved. In my senior year, I met Tyler in my advanced finance seminar. Smart, kind, and from a loving family, he was everything I had never experienced. When he invited me home for Thanksgiving, I witnessed for the first time what a supportive family looked like. His parents asked about my classes, my goals, my opinions. They seemed genuinely interested in me as a person, not as a resource. "Why are you crying?" Tyler asked when he found me alone in the guest room that night. "Because I didn't know families could be like yours," I admitted. I didn't know parents could love their children without conditions. That Thanksgiving weekend changed something fundamental in how I viewed family relationships. I began to understand that what I had experienced wasn't normal or healthy. And most importantly, I realized I deserved better. I graduated with a bachelor's degree in finance and a minor in business administration. My GPA of 3.7 earned me cum laude honors, though no one from my family attended the ceremony. Emma wanted to come, but my parents claimed they couldn't afford the trip, even though it was only a 3-hour drive. Michael, my internship supervisor, had been impressed enough to offer me a full-time position at Meridian Financial Services after graduation. The starting salary of $50,000 a year felt astronomical after years of scraping by. My first major decision was housing. Most of my colleagues chose to rent apartments in trendy neighborhoods, spending 30 to 40% of their income on housing. I opted for a tiny studio in an older building, 45 minutes from the office by bus. The rent consumed only 20% of my take-home pay, allowing me to focus on my next financial goals, paying off student loans and saving for a house. I created a detailed 5-year plan. Year 1, build an emergency fund and begin loan repayment. Years 2 to 4, accelerate loan payments and build a down payment fund. Year 5, house hunting. My lifestyle remained frugal despite my new salary. I brought lunch to work, shopped at discount stores, and continued to use public transportation instead of buying a car. Colleagues often invited me to happy hours or weekend trips, but I declined, knowing each $60 dinner or the $300 getaway would delay my goals. Jessica remained my closest friend. She had landed a teaching job at a local high school and shared my values around financial independence. "Most people our age aren't thinking about retirement accounts or mortgage rates." She laughed one evening as we reviewed my spreadsheet over cheap pizza. "Most people our age didn't pay rent to their parents at 16, I replied. My relationship with Tyler had evolved from classmates to close friends to something more complicated. He respected my financial goals, but struggled to understand why I pushed myself so hard. "You deserve to enjoy life now, not just prepare for some future that might never come," he'd argued during our frequent discussions about my rigid budget. "I am enjoying life," I'd insist. "Financial security is worth more to me than temporary pleasures." Our different perspectives eventually led to a mutual decision to remain friends rather than pursue a romantic relationship. Though painful, this choice allowed me to maintain focus on my goals without compromise. At work, my dedication and financial acumen didn't go unnoticed. Within 18 months, I received my first promotion to financial analyst with a salary increase to $62,000. Rather than expanding my lifestyle, I stayed frugal and funneled the extra income toward my student loans. By the end of my 3rd year at Meridian, I had paid off my $40,000 in student loans, built a $12,000 emergency fund, and began serious saving for a house down payment. The accomplishment felt monumental. Yet I had no one to truly share it with who understood the significance. Throughout this time, my relationship with my family remained strained and one-sided. The pattern established during college continued, rare communication except when financial needs arose. Emma was now in high school, excelling in music and academics. My parents spoke of her potential with the same reverence they always had, and their expectations for her future were grandiose. Emma's piano teacher thinks she could get into Juilliard, my mother announced during one of our infrequent phone calls. Of course, the application process and audition prep will be expensive. The statement hung in the air, the unspoken request clear. I had already sent $3,000 that year for various expenses related to Emma's activities. Each time I told myself it was for my sister, not for them. But the line was becoming increasingly blurred. Mom, I have my own financial goals I'm working toward, I said carefully. I can't be Emma's college fund. The silence on the other end was frigid. I see. Your sister's future means nothing to you now that you have your fancy job and city apartment. The guilt trip was familiar, but this time something in me resisted. That's not fair. I've helped a lot over the years, but I can't be expected to finance another person's education when I just finished paying for my own. The conversation ended poorly, with my mother accusing me of being selfish and cold. Those words still stung, but I held firm to my boundaries. 2 weeks later, my father called with a more direct approach. Emma got accepted to Westfield University. Full 4-year tuition is $40,000 per year. We need to know how much you can contribute. Westfield was a prestigious private university known for its arts programs and astronomical costs. I was stunned by both the assumption I'd contribute and the amount in question. Dad, that's over $160,000 total. I don't have that kind of money to give. You make good money now. You could take out a loan to help your sister. That's what family does. The irony of his statement wasn't lost on me. Family helps each other when they can, I said. No one helped me with my education. That was different. You were always independent. I wasn't given a choice, I replied. The conversation dissolved into accusations and old resentments. My father eventually hung up after telling me I was breaking my mother's heart with my selfishness. Despite the emotional toll these interactions took, I remained committed to my financial plan. When Emma herself called to ask about college funding, I took a different approach. I can't pay your tuition, Emma, I told her gently, but I can help you apply for scholarships, look into more affordable schools, and teach you how to manage money so you can be independent, like I had to be. Her response surprised me. I never asked them to put this on you, Amber. I know how hard you worked for everything you have. That conversation was the first genuine connection I had felt with my sister in years. We began talking more regularly, with me serving as a sounding board and advisor rather than a checkbook. I helped her apply for scholarships and financial aid, resulting in a substantial package from a state university comparable to the one I had attended. My parents were disappointed by her choice, seeing it as settling for less than she deserved. They continued to pressure me for contributions, which I had earmarked specifically for Emma's textbooks or dormitory supplies. By my 5th year at Meridian, now as a senior financial analyst with a salary of $78,000, I had saved enough for a 20% down payment on a modest home. My years of sacrifice and discipline were about to pay off in the form of the stability I had craved since childhood. What I didn't anticipate was how my family would react to this milestone, or how their reaction would forever change our relationship. House hunting was both exciting and terrifying. I had specific criteria: a small but well-maintained home in a safe neighborhood, good public transportation access, priced under $250,000. My real estate agent, Natalie, was patient as we viewed dozens of properties over 3 months. Most first-time buyers your age are looking for condos or continuing to rent, she commented one day. It's impressive that you're in a position to buy a house outright. I smiled, feeling a rare moment of pride. I've been working toward this since I was 16. Finally, we found it. A 1920s bungalow with 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a functional kitchen, and a tiny backyard. At $220,000, it was within my budget. The inspection revealed no major issues, and the location was perfect, close enough to work but in an affordable area. Signing the mortgage papers was surreal. Despite years of planning for this moment, I could hardly believe it was happening. The loan officer remarked that it was unusual to see someone my age with such a solid financial foundation. Most people your age have minimal credit history and mountains of student debt, he said. I paid off my student loans 3 years ago, I replied, unable to keep the pride from my voice. The day I received the keys, I stood alone in the empty living room of my new home, overwhelmed with emotion. This house represented not just a financial investment, but a psychological one. It was tangible proof that I had overcome my upbringing, that I could provide for myself what my parents never had: security. Jessica and Tyler helped me move in, bringing housewarming gifts and champagne to celebrate. We sat on the floor eating pizza as I hadn't yet purchased furniture. To Amber, Jessica toasted, raising her plastic cup, who worked harder than anyone I know to get here. To having roots, Tyler added, something you deserve more than anyone. After settling in for a few weeks, I decided it was time to invite my family to see the house. Despite our strained relationship, this was a milestone I wanted to share with them. Perhaps I thought, naively, that seeing my success would make them proud. They arrived on a Saturday afternoon. My father critically eyed the exterior as they walked up the path to the front door. "It's small," was his first comment upon entering. "Perfect size for me," I replied, trying to maintain a positive tone. My mother walked through the rooms with an expression of faint distaste, touching surfaces and quietly inspecting for flaws. "This neighborhood isn't very upscale, is it?" "It's safe and convenient to my office," I explained. Emma, now in her second year of college, seemed genuinely happy for me. "I think it's awesome, Amber. You worked so hard for this." I had prepared lunch, hoping to create a pleasant atmosphere, maybe even a new beginning. We sat around my new dining table. The conversation at first focused on surface-level topics: commute times, neighborhood amenities, home ownership tips. Then my mother set down her fork and cleared her throat. "Emma has some news she needs to share." Emma looked down at her plate, clearly uncomfortable. I might have to take a break from school next semester." "What? Why?" I asked, concerned. "The scholarship I had for this year wasn't renewed," she said quietly, "and my student loan application was denied because of Dad's credit score. We've had some financial setbacks," my father said defensively. "Medical bills, car repairs, you know how it is." "So what's the plan?" I asked, already sensing where this conversation was going. "Well," my mother began, her tone shifting into one I knew all too well, "we thought, given your new purchase, that you must be in a very comfortable financial position. I just bought a house. I'm not exactly flush with cash right now." "But surely you must have savings left," she pressed. "Or you could take out a home equity loan," my father added. "Emma needs about $20,000 for this year." I stared at them in disbelief. "I used all my savings for the down payment, and I'm not going to borrow against the house I just bought." "So you're just going to let your sister drop out of college?" my mother asked, her voice rising. "After all we've done for you?" The absurdity of her statement left me momentarily speechless. "What exactly have you done for me? I've been working and supporting myself since I was 16. I paid for my own education. I bought this house entirely on my own." "We raised you," my father said indignantly. "We put a roof over your head." "A roof I paid rent for as a teenager," I countered. The argument escalated quickly. My parents accused me of being selfish, of forgetting where I came from, of abandoning family in their time of need. I pointed out the years of financial support I had already given, the lack of support I had received, and the unfairness of expecting me to mortgage my future for Emma. "You've always been jealous of the attention Emma received," my mother declared. "This is your way of punishing her for being more talented." "This has nothing to do with Emma," I said, trying to stay calm. "This is about boundaries and reasonable expectations." Emma, who had remained silent during the entire exchange, finally spoke up. "Please stop fighting. I'll figure something out. I can take a semester off and work full-time to save money." "Absolutely not," my mother snapped. "You're not throwing away your future because your sister is too selfish to help." I turned to Emma directly. "I can help you look into scholarship options, maybe work-study programs. There are alternatives to dropping out or going into massive debt." "The only alternative is for you to step up and do the right thing," my father insisted. "Family takes care of family." "I have been taking care of this family financially since I was a teenager," I said, my patience finally gone. "I'm done being your ATM." My father stood up abruptly. "If that's how you feel, then maybe we need to reconsider what family means. You clearly have the resources to help, but you're choosing not to." "This house represents years of sacrifice and hard work," I said. "I'm not jeopardizing that." "That house should be helping secure Emma's future, not sitting here as a monument to your selfishness," my mother declared. As they prepared to leave, my father delivered a parting shot that would prove prophetic. "This isn't over, Amber. If you won't do the right thing voluntarily, there are other ways to ensure family obligations are met." I assumed it was an empty threat, the kind of dramatic statement my parents often made in anger. I was wrong. 3 weeks after that disastrous family visit, I received an envelope from the county court. Inside was a summons informing me that I was being sued by John and Karen Collins, my parents, for 70% of the value of my home, approximately $154,000. The legal complaint alleged that I had a moral and implied financial obligation to support my sister's education, and that my purchase of a home instead constituted financial abandonment and theft of family resources. The document actually used the phrase, stealing her sister's future, to describe my home purchase. I sat on my living room floor, the papers scattered around me, unable to process what I was reading. This couldn't be real. Parents don't sue their children over money. They don't drag family disputes into courtrooms. Yet, the official seal and case number confirmed this wasn't a joke or an empty threat. My hands shook as I dialed my parents' number, praying this was all some elaborate scare tactic we could still talk through. My father answered on the fourth ring. "Dad, I just received court papers. Are you and Mom actually suing me?" "We're simply seeking what's fair," he replied, his tone eerily calm. "You refused to help your sister voluntarily, so we're pursuing legal means." "This is insane. You can't seriously think a court will force me to give you house money." "Our lawyer thinks we have a case, based on family obligation, implied contract. You benefited from family resources growing up. Now you owe a return on that investment." The conversation became increasingly surreal as my father outlined their legal position like it was the most rational thing in the world, as if suing your own child made sense. "Dad, please, this will destroy what little relationship we have left." "That's your choice, Amber. Do the right thing, and we can put this behind us." After hanging up, I sat frozen for nearly an hour before finally calling Jessica. She arrived at my house 30 minutes later with wine and a fire in her eyes. "This cannot be legal," she said, flipping through the documents. "They can't just claim a right to your house because they want the money." The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in my career and began searching for a lawyer. By noon, I had an appointment with Linda Cohen, a family law attorney whose firm specialized in complex domestic disputes. Her office was warm and tastefully decorated, bookshelves, soft lighting, comfortable chairs, all in sharp contrast to the cold reality of my situation. After reviewing the documents, she looked up at me with a mixture of professional concern and empathy. "I've seen some very contentious family disputes in my 20 years of practice," she said slowly, "but parents suing a child for buying their own home? That's a first." "So, do they actually have a case?" She shook her head. "Legally, their argument has almost no merit. There's no enforceable precedent in family law that would entitle parents to their adult child's assets based on an implied obligation to a sibling." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "But," she continued, "they've still filed a suit, which means you'll need to defend yourself, and that will cost time, money, and emotional energy." We talked strategy. Linda advised me to begin compiling evidence of my financial independence: tax returns, proof of student loan payments, employment history, and records of any money I had given my family over the years. "Their claim hinges on the idea that you owe them something," she explained. "We need to clearly show that, if anything, the financial support has flowed in the opposite direction." The following weeks were a blur of legal preparation, paperwork, mounting anxiety, and sleepless nights. My performance at work began to suffer as my focus fractured. Fortunately, Michael, my supervisor, had always been perceptive. He called me into his office one Friday afternoon. "You've seemed distracted," he said gently. "Is everything okay?" It took everything in me not to cry as I explained the situation. His face darkened with disbelief as I spoke. "Amber, what your parents are doing, it's not normal. It's not loving. It's financial and emotional abuse." Hearing those words out loud, abuse, from someone I respected professionally, was like someone opening a window in a dark, closed room. I'd spent so long rationalizing their behavior, blaming myself, minimizing it. But now, someone else, someone outside the dysfunction, was confirming what I had only just begun to understand. My relationship with my parents was not just difficult, it was unhealthy. Support began to come from unexpected places. Colleagues checked in on me. My neighbor brought over frozen meals, just in case I forgot to eat. Even did I. Tyler. Despite our complicated history, reached out and offered to help me organize my financial documents. His quiet presence was reassuring, a reminder that I wasn't alone in this. Jessica, ever practical, suggested I find a therapist. "This is trauma, Amber. You need support to process what's happening. It's not just a legal battle, it's your entire sense of family being ripped apart." She was right. I found Dr. Russell, a therapist who specialized in family estrangement and financial abuse. She offered sliding scale rates for clients in high-stress situations. In our first session, I unloaded everything: my childhood, the years of being the backup plan, the silent guilt, the lawsuit. She listened carefully, then said something that shifted my perspective entirely. Your parents created a dynamic where your worth was tied to what you could provide. Children are not financial assets. You were never meant to be their safety net. They reversed the natural order of care, and now you're paying the emotional interest. It hit me like a train. As the court date approached, I received an unexpected call from Emma. I just found out about the lawsuit, she said, her voice shaky. I had no idea they were doing this. I never asked them to sue you. You didn't know? I asked cautiously. No, I would never want this. I'm so sorry they're putting you through it. Her words hit me harder than I expected. Dr. Russell had advised me to emotionally separate my parents from my sister, and now I finally could. Emma wasn't the one dragging me into court. She wasn't trying to steal my house. She was stuck in a different kind of prison, still living under the same roof, still being told what to want, still dependent. The lawsuit consumed my thoughts. I had nightmares about being evicted, about bailiffs at the door, about judges ordering me to hand over my house keys. During the day, I checked my bank balance obsessively, calculating how long I could survive if everything went wrong. Linda kept reassuring me that it wouldn't. The law is on your side, she said during our final meeting before court. Parents can't force their adult child to pay for a sibling's education. They may believe they're morally right, but there is no legal foundation for this claim. Still, it felt like I was walking into a battlefield. We gathered every shred of evidence. Tax returns proving I hadn't been claimed as a dependent since I was 18, tuition statements, employment records, and over a decade's worth of bank transfers, showing more than $15,000 in financial contributions to my family. Emma even provided a signed statement confirming that she had never requested I pay for her education and didn't want the lawsuit to continue. Linda called it open and shut, but to me, it felt like standing trial for having the audacity to put my own needs first. The day of the hearing arrived. I woke at 4 a.m., unable to sleep. I dressed in a navy blue suit and pulled my hair back into a tidy bun. I needed to look composed, even if I felt anything but. The county courthouse was a stone fortress that seemed to radiate judgment. Linda met me at the entrance. We passed through security, climbed marble steps, and entered courtroom C. Inside, everything felt surreal. We took our place at the defendant's table and began organizing our files. Remember, Linda whispered, let me do the talking unless the judge speaks to you directly. Just breathe. We've got this. My parents arrived 10 minutes later, flanked by their attorney, a thin man with a hard-set jaw and a briefcase that looked heavier than his conscience. They didn't look at me as they walked past. My mother sat rigid, arms crossed. My father leaned in to whisper with their lawyer. The emotional distance between us was louder than any words. Then, the door behind the bench opened. Judge Harriet Wilson entered. A woman in her 60s with silver hair, sharp eyes, and a measured presence. She took her seat, scanned the docket, and glanced over her reading glasses. I've been on this bench for 17 years, she began, and I must say this is one of the more unusual family disputes I've encountered. She looked up. Mr. and Mrs. Collins, you are suing your daughter for 70% of the value of her home, alleging she has stolen her sister's future by refusing to fund her education. Is that correct? Their attorney stood. Yes, Your Honor. My clients believe their elder daughter has a moral obligation to support her younger sister, especially given the family's sacrifices and investments in her upbringing. Judge Wilson's expression remained neutral, but her voice tightened slightly. Moral obligation, she repeated. We're here to discuss legal obligation. Please clarify the legal basis for your claim. What followed was a convoluted and uncomfortable argument from my parents' lawyer about implied family contracts, reciprocal obligation, and the expectation that adult children should return the investments made in them during childhood. It was absurd, but he delivered it as if citing case law. Linda sat beside me, calm and composed, taking notes as she listened. Every so often, she would gently tap her pen against my arm, her way of saying, "You're doing great. Stay grounded." When it was our turn, she stood and addressed the judge with poised confidence. Your Honor, the plaintiff's case is without legal merit. Miss Collins was a minor child under her parents' care. Parents are legally and morally obligated to provide for their children. It's not a business contract. There is no return on investment for parenting. She went on to lay out every piece of evidence: my independence since age 16, tax returns showing I hadn't been claimed as a dependent in over a decade, student loan records, employment history, and the big one, bank records showing I had transferred over $15,000 to my parents and Emma since turning 18. Far from being selfish or withholding, Linda concluded, Miss Collins has been more generous than most would ever expect of someone who was forced to support herself from adolescence. There is no legal obligation, implied or otherwise, to finance her sister's education, especially not at the cost of her own stability. She submitted the documents as exhibits. Judge Wilson leaned forward, reading them with a furrowed brow. Mr. and Mrs. Collins, she said, looking up, were you aware of these financial contributions? My father squirmed. Those were gifts, not related to this matter. $15,000 in gifts, Judge Wilson said, her voice pointed. Seems quite generous from someone you're portraying as selfish and unwilling to help her family. My mother finally broke her silence. That money was nothing compared to what Emma needs. Amber has a good job now. She just bought a house. She clearly has money she's withholding. The judge turned to me. Miss Collins, can you speak to your current financial situation, post-purchase? I glanced at Linda, who gave a subtle nod. I stood. I've worked multiple jobs since I was 16. I paid for college myself, graduated with debt, and worked hard to pay it off. I lived frugally, still do. I only recently bought a modest home after saving for years. I don't have $20,000 just sitting in a bank account. I have a mortgage and financial goals I'm still working toward. I'm not wealthy. I'm just careful. Judge Wilson nodded, then looked back at my parents. Mr. and Mrs. Collins, what steps did you take to financially prepare for your younger daughter's education? There was a long pause. My parents exchanged glances. We expected scholarships would cover it, my father said. Emma is very talented. And did you make the same expectation for your elder daughter? The judge asked, lifting an eyebrow. She was always independent, my mother said quickly, her tone dismissive. Amber made her own way. Because I had no choice, I blurted out before I could stop myself. The judge didn't reprimand me. She just gave me a long, measured look and nodded. Then she turned back to my parents. Did you contribute financially to Miss Collins's college education? We couldn't afford to at the time, my father said. Yet you expect her to afford her sister's education now. That hung in the courtroom like smoke. My parents didn't respond. The proceedings continued with more back and forth. Family dynamics, expectations, obligations, disappointments. My parents' lawyer tried to paint the case as a simple sibling dispute, a matter of fairness, of heart over law. But Linda brought it back, again and again, to Kian facts. And then something unexpected happened. Just as we were preparing for closing statements, the door at the back of the courtroom creaked open, and Emma walked in. She slipped quietly into the last row. Our eyes met. She looked nervous, but determined. When Judge Wilson called for a short recess, Emma approached our table. Can I speak to the judge? She asked softly, looking at Linda. Linda hesitated. What do you want to say? That I never asked for this. That I didn't know. That I don't want Amber to pay for my education this way. Linda looked over to the judge, who had remained on the bench. Your Honor, the younger sister in question has just arrived and wishes to address the court. Judge Wilson considered it for a moment. Approach, Miss Collins. Emma stepped forward, pale but steady. I just want to make it clear, she said, her voice shaking slightly, that I never asked my parents to sue Amber. I didn't even know they were doing this until a few days ago. I would never want her to lose the house she worked so hard for. My mother made a sound, half protest, half disbelief, but the judge silenced her with a raised hand. Go on, she said to Emma. Amber has helped me in so many ways, Emma continued. She taught me how to budget, helped me apply for scholarships, encouraged me when no one else did. I don't need a $40,000 per year school to succeed. I just need the chance to earn my own way, like she did. The room was still. Judge Wilson leaned back. Thank you, Miss Collins. Emma returned to her seat, her eyes glistening. And then, without any more argument, Judge Wilson began her ruling. Having reviewed the evidence and heard all relevant testimony, Judge Wilson began, I find the plaintiff's claim entirely without legal merit. My heart pounded. There exists no statute, precedent, or contractual agreement that obligates an adult child to fund a sibling's education. Parenting is not a financial transaction to be repaid by the child, nor does the court recognize the concept of stealing a sibling's future through homeownership. She turned to my parents, her voice firm but not unkind. Mr. and Mrs. Collins, what concerns me most is not simply the lack of legal standing in your case, but the tone and pattern of expectation placed on your elder daughter. The evidence clearly shows that Amber Collins has been financially independent since the age of 16, has supported herself entirely through college, and has provided more than $15,000 in voluntary support to you and her sister over the past decade. My mother opened her mouth, but the judge held up a hand. This case does not speak to fairness or morality. It speaks to boundaries. Adult children are entitled to establish them, and they are under no legal obligation to jeopardize their stability to meet the expectations of family members. Then came the unexpected blow to my parents. Furthermore, I find this lawsuit to be frivolous and potentially vexatious in nature. It has placed undue emotional and financial stress on the defendant. As such, I am ordering that all reasonable legal fees incurred by Miss Collins be paid by the plaintiffs. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. My parents sat frozen. The judge looked back at me. Miss Collins, you may file for reimbursement of legal expenses. I encourage you to do so. I nodded, barely able to find my voice. Thank you, Your Honor. With a final bang of her gavel, the case was dismissed. As the courtroom emptied, I remained seated, unable to move, hardly able to breathe. The burden I had carried for years wasn't just lifted, it had been publicly acknowledged as real, as wrong. My parents exited without speaking to me, their backs stiff, their pace quick. I didn't expect anything different. But Emma stayed. She approached slowly, nervously. I'm so sorry, Amber, she said. I never wanted any of this, and I never agreed to it. It's not your fault, I said softly. She hesitated. Can we talk? Maybe get coffee sometime? I nodded, still stunned. Yeah, I'd like that. That simple moment, just the two of us, felt like the beginning of something new. Something untainted by guilt or comparison. A relationship based on choice, not obligation. As Linda and I packed up the folders and paperwork, she turned to me. Family estrangement is painful, she said gently, but sometimes it's the first step toward healing. You've established your legal boundaries. Now it's time to start working on the emotional ones. Leaving the courthouse, I felt a strange mix of grief and hope. The fight was over, but what it had exposed, what it had clarified, would stay with me forever. I took a week off work to recover. I didn't hear from my parents, nor did I expect to. The silence confirmed what had been true for a long time. Our relationship was transactional, not unconditional. And now that I had severed that transaction, there was nothing left for them to extract. Dr. Russell helped me process it. You're grieving a relationship that never truly existed, she explained. You're mourning the parents you needed, not the ones you had. That grief is valid, it's real, and it deserves space. We talked about internal boundaries, the guilt I still carried, the reflex to justify their behavior. I began to recognize when I was slipping into old thought patterns, when I felt responsible for their disappointment or anger. 2 weeks after the court case, I met Emma for coffee. We chose a neutral cafe halfway between our campuses. The conversation was awkward at first. Years of uneven dynamics had built a wall between us. I moved out, she said eventually. I'm staying with my friend Sophia for now. Are you still in school? She nodded. I reduced my course load and got a job at the campus bookstore. It'll take longer to graduate, but I'll get there. I smiled. I'm proud of you, Emma. Taking control of your path isn't easy. She met my eyes. I had a good example. That moment, so quiet, so sincere, meant more to me than anything my parents had ever said. As the months passed, we started to build a new kind of bond. Emma leaned on me for advice, not money. She shared her victories and setbacks. She listened when I needed to vent. We stopped being symbols of our parents' favoritism and started being sisters. Meanwhile, I turned my focus back to my home. The house that had been the center of so much conflict slowly became my refuge again. I painted the walls, planted a small herb garden, bought secondhand furniture one piece at a time. Each improvement was a declaration. This is mine. I earned this. I built it. Work brought stability too. Michael, aware of everything I'd endured, gave me more responsibility. I managed client portfolios, led internal trainings, and even mentored new hires. A year after the lawsuit, I was promoted again, this time to senior analyst, with a salary that allowed me to start investing for the future. Jessica remained my closest friend, steadfast and unshakable. "You know what amazes me most about you?" she said one Saturday afternoon as we assembled shelves in my kitchen. "Your capacity for joy. After everything, you never became bitter." Her words surprised me, but she was right. Despite it all, I still believed in possibility, in healing, in a different kind of future. And so, I started something new, a blog for financially independent young adults from dysfunctional families. I shared budgeting strategies, how to escape toxic dynamics, how to build credit without a cosigner, how to say no. I expected maybe a dozen readers. Instead, I got hundreds, and then thousands. The comments poured in, stories from strangers who felt like family, people who had grown up in similar homes, carrying guilt, debt, and responsibility that was never theirs to begin with. Some wrote, "I thought I was the only one." Others said, "Reading this gave me the courage to set my own boundaries." What started as a simple blog became a support network. I began hosting weekly video chats, inviting guest speakers, financial advisors, therapists, survivors of generational trauma. The conversations were raw and real. We didn't just talk about money. We talked about grief, about shame, about letting go of people who couldn't love us the way we needed. It became more than healing. It became purpose. 6 months after the court case, I received a handwritten letter in a pale blue envelope. The handwriting was familiar, my mother's. I let it sit on the kitchen counter for 3 days before I opened it. Amber, the past few months have given me time to reflect. I still believe families should support one another, but I see now that we place too many burdens on you. That realization has been painful to admit. I'm not asking for forgiveness right away, but I hope we can begin the process of healing. Love, Mom. It wasn't a perfect apology. She didn't take full responsibility. She didn't mention the lawsuit or the years of emotional manipulation, but it was something, a crack in the wall. I showed the letter to Dr. Russell, unsure what to do. "If you decide to meet with her," she said, "do it on your terms, in a public space, with boundaries clearly in place." So I did. We met at a cafe near my office. I arrived early, sat by the window, ordered tea, and practiced deep breathing. When my mother walked in, she looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, but emotionally, like someone who had spent months replaying everything in her head. The conversation was careful, neutral. She asked about work. I asked about Emma. She admitted my father still believed they were right to sue me, that he hadn't changed his mind. "I miss having you in my life," she said near the end of the conversation. "I can't go back to the old dynamic," I replied. "Any relationship we have going forward has to be based on mutual respect, not obligation." She nodded slowly. "I don't know what that looks like, but I'd like to try." It wasn't a fairy tale reconciliation, but it wasn't a total failure either. Over the next several months, we built a fragile truce. We met for coffee occasionally. She stopped asking for money. I stopped expecting apologies that would never come. My father remained distant, still angry, still convinced that I'd betrayed the family. But I had accepted that some relationships wouldn't be repaired, and I no longer needed them to be. 1 year after closing on my house, I hosted a quiet anniversary gathering. I bought a chocolate cake, set out paper lanterns in the backyard, and invited the people who had carried me through the worst year of my life. Emma came, bringing her new boyfriend and a homemade fruit tart. Jessica and Tyler were there. So were a few co-workers and my neighbor from next door who'd once left chicken soup at my door during court week. My mother declined the invitation. She sent a polite note instead, perhaps sensing that full family restoration was still far off. As I looked around that night, at people who chose me, not out of obligation but out of love, I felt something I hadn't known I was missing. Peace. The house that had once felt like a battlefield was now a home again. Each mortgage payment was a reminder that I had done this, that I had protected it, that I had protected myself. Every shelf I mounted, every wall I painted, every flower I planted in the backyard was an act of defiance and freedom. The most important lesson I had learned was this: guilt is not responsibility. For years, I thought I was selfish for setting limits, for saying no, for choosing my own well-being over my family's expectations. But therapy, time, and lived experience taught me the truth. Boundaries aren't walls, they're definitions. They clarify where I end and someone else begins. They make love honest. They make freedom possible. I still had days where sadness hit me without warning. Days when I missed the idea of a supportive family. What could have been? I still sometimes questioned whether I could have handled things differently. But those moments passed. They didn't define me anymore. One Saturday morning, I posted a question to my blog's community. What would you do if you had to choose between family expectations and your own future? Have you ever had to set a boundary that felt impossible but necessary? The responses came flooding in. Stories of estranged parents, manipulated bank accounts, siblings who took and took and took, but also stories of people reclaiming their lives, rediscovering joy, starting over. We weren't broken, we were rebuilding. That final blog post went viral. Not because it was dramatic or bitter, but because it was honest, raw, real. So many people had grown up believing love had to be earned. That stability came with a cost. That being a good daughter meant sacrificing until there was nothing left. But I was living proof that it didn't have to be that way. You could choose a different path. You could draw a line in the sand and survive what came after. You could say no and still be worthy of love. A few months later, I was invited to speak on a panel about financial literacy and emotional boundaries. It felt surreal sitting next to professionals and activists, all of us united by a simple truth, that money and family are often deeply intertwined and painfully misunderstood. I shared my story. Not just the lawsuit or the spreadsheet or the court victory, but the emotional unraveling that followed. The grief, the silence, the strange, aching relief, and the rebuilding. After the event, a young woman approached me, maybe 19 or 20, eyes wide and tearful. "Thank you," she said. "Your story, it sounded like mine, and I thought I was the problem." I took her hand and said, "You're not, you never were." That's what I wish someone had told me when I was 16, sitting at the kitchen table with a calculator, being told to pay rent while my sister got ballet shoes and custom furniture. I wasn't selfish, I wasn't ungrateful, I wasn't hard-hearted. I was surviving. And eventually, I did more than survive. I built something, a life, a home, a version of success that wasn't about wealth or titles, but about safety, ownership, freedom. Today, I still live in that little bungalow. The backyard herbs have grown into a full garden. There's art on the walls and shelves filled with books I once couldn't afford to buy. Emma visits often. She's finishing her degree and has started mentoring younger students. Sometimes we sit on the porch and talk about what it means to rewrite your own story, especially when you were born into someone else's script. Jessica is still my rock, and Tyler drops by now and then, always with thoughtful gifts and kind words. My circle is small, but strong. I've learned that family isn't just who you're born to. It's who shows up, who respects you, who sees your boundaries not as rejection, but as love given structure. If you're watching this or reading this and you've had to choose between keeping your family happy and keeping yourself whole, I want you to know. And you're not wrong for choosing you. You are allowed to protect your peace. You are allowed to grow beyond the role your family gave you. You are allowed to have joy, even if they don't understand it. And no matter what they say, you are not selfish for setting yourself free. So here's my question to you. What does freedom look like for you? Have you ever had to set a boundary that changed everything? Drop your story in the comments. Someone out there needs to hear it, just like I once needed to hear yours. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to know they're not alone. Because healing doesn't happen in isolation. It happens in community. Thank you for listening. Take care of yourself. You deserve to. Amber.